Welcome, folks. My name is Michael Ham. I'm a partner for research and policy here at FullScale. Super excited to be chatting with you all about some emerging research and findings from our work with rural school teams around AI implementation. I'm joined today by one of our co-chief executive officers, Virgil Hammonds, who you can see on your screen as well, and my colleague, Dr. Megan Benay, who is a partner on our practice and implementation team, who's actually running the program itself. So if I'm understanding what the policy implications are around rural AI adoption, Megan is understanding what's happening in practice. You're going to see a lot of all three of us, but for the sake of time, we know that we're the least interesting people here. We've got some panelists who are going to be sharing a little bit more about their work in just a little bit. So for the sake of time, I'm going to cut their introductions. And just share a little bit more about our agenda because it is jam-packed. We're going to start off with some framing from Virgil. Why this project? Why now? What's this moment? What are we hoping to learn? I'm going to be sharing some of the findings from the research that we did that's really underpinning the rest of the program. Megan will be sharing out what are we actually doing in the program? What are we working on alongside rural school teams around AI adoption? Four, we're going to be looking at some practice. What does that mean for the actual people who are doing this work, some of our participants in our program, and then we'll round it back out with Virgil, just helping us understand where are we taking this next? What are some of the implications for the field at large? How are we applying these learnings within and across different contexts? So with that, Virgil, I'm going to pass it off to you to help us understand why this moment.
Perfect. Thank you, Michael, and welcome everyone. I think it's important to ground us in what we believe about teaching and learning. So let's start there. At full scale, our work is anchored in this clear North Star represented in this visual here. We believe that every young person deserves learning that is personalized to who they are, truly competency based in how they progress, advancement based on mastery rather than seat time, and holistic in development. We also believe that learning should be relevant, rigorous. That's where the competency piece comes in. And relational and should give learners that voice and choice, right? That real agency and the opportunity to apply what they know in a variety of contexts throughout the learning community. The learning experiences and systems that we are trying to design towards incorporate all three of these elements cohesively. And Megan, if you can advance the slide, we can talk about how we actually make that real at a genuine scale for every young person. And you'll hear this in a meta theme across today's webinar. It requires a great deal of coherence across these four interconnected domains. Practice, which is really focusing on what learners actually experience, both in the classroom and across the learning community. People who are the educators, both on the traditional school side and untraditional across the learning community, who make these learning experiences possible. Policy, which are the rules and the structures that enable transformation, and progress, which is essentially how we measure, how we communicate, and how we use that evidence about what's working. And these four domains are not independent variables, right? That again, that meta theme of coherence across all four Ps in real systems for all of our young people is what transformation requires, which really is what brings us today's webinar around rule and why rule AI matters. Megan? Thank you. And before we begin and launch into the work, I want to acknowledge, and looking at the list of the folks that have registered for today's webinar, that we are joined by extraordinary leaders that are represented on this call, both from rural and small district leaders carrying a unique kind of responsibility. You are not simply leading systems; you are often serving in a variety of roles, wearing multiple hats as a strategist, as a communicator, sometimes custodian or bus driver, problem solver, crisis manager, community connector. This is you every single day. And as a former rural superintendent, I understand what it means to lead in a context where capacity can feel super thin, right? Yet the needs of our learners, our staff, our learning community remain just as complex as any and urgent as any large system. And yet, what I've always admired most about rural leadership is that it's driven by purpose, proximity, and certainly a ton of creativity, and most importantly, an unwavering commitment to young people, which is what brings us to the Rural AI Strategy Lab. It reflects our full scale 4Ps in action, right? Grounding this work in scalable policy, strengthening educator and student practices, building collaborative partnerships with people across our learning community, and ensuring every learner has equitable opportunities through powerful possibilities through AI innovation. By elevating rural voices, creating these practical tools, and accelerated the shared learning that we're gathering from the strategy lab, this work demonstrates how the four Ps move beyond theory and become a coherent strategy for transformational impact in the learning communities that are participating and across our network at full scale. With that, Michael, I'll turn it back to you. Let's learn more about the project, our findings, and about the learning communities leading the work.
Awesome. Thank you, Virgil, for that framing. Um, Sorry, I had an unmute notification that popped up. Like as Virgil said, right, like building coherence and understanding how this conversation shapes broader conversations or how we change what's the typical conversation is around rural AI adoption starts with understanding what's actually going on in practice. And so the purpose of this webinar is really around launching a report that shares the same name as this webinar. So AI in rural schools, what we're seeing in practice. You can access the report in the link that my colleague just dropped into the chat. But again, before launching into this work, we really wanted to understand and surface how rural schools and systems are already approaching AI in practice and what their experiences might reveal about how implementation works across context. A little bit of information about our methodology. This included a desk research landscape scan of over 240 rural schools and districts, right? So looking at what kind of publicly available information there was from board documentation to evidence of implementation in local media, right? Like thinking pretty broadly about how can we understand where AI practices might be emerging, how AI work might be demonstrated by these folks or by folks in rural context. It also included 22 interviews with leaders at the national, state, intermediary, and local levels to understand where is their purview, where are they working, how are they intentionally spotlighting the work of rural folks or intentionally supporting rural folks around their unique needs, how are they understanding the unique needs of those folks. In addition to those pieces, we also had 114 applications for our program that Megan's going to share a little bit more about later today, the Rural AI Strategy Lab. And across those 114 applications, we had 34 states represented. And then in addition, we had 33 in-depth interviews with finalist teams. So this report and the findings that I'm about to dive into really organize all of the information that we learned from all of these pieces. So just want to name again the desk research, the interviews, the applications, and some in-depth interviews with finalists interested in the program as well. Megan, take us to the next slide. The very first thing that we want to start with was what are the opportunities, right? Like what are the things that folks see AI as being able to enable in rural context? One of the key themes that we noticed was when we talked to rural leaders, it never started with constraint or like we can't do this. It was always we're really excited about one of these three opportunities, if not all of them, right? But we're really excited about the opportunities that this enables for our kids, and the things that it makes possible for them at scale, or that it might if we're able to figure it out. The first one is really about expanding student access. What this means, AI is helping rural systems push beyond the limits around distance, around staffing, around program availability. And the examples that were elevated in our conversations and across our desk research, advanced coursework beyond local offerings, personalized academic supports through chatbots, through tutors, exposure to career pathways and future opportunities as well. So how are we helping students see beyond their local context? How are we connecting them to information, to leaders, to teachers across and content that isn't necessarily locally available? And just a note, 66% of the 114 applications reference access for underserved students as one of their key drivers. And expanding access is repeatedly identified as a core motivation across all of our applications. The second one here, recovering and extending educator capacity. This might not feel like a shock, but in a system where there are fewer educators, where there are lots of folks wearing multiple hats, AI is helping rural systems to sustain and extend what their teams can accomplish within existing constraints. The examples that came to mind here are reducing administrative and planning workloads, stabilizing staffing pressures and overlapping roles, protecting time for instruction and student support. And just again, from the data, 54% of the 114 applications reference some sort of time, capacity, workload constraints as like helping to shape the work that they're, or the things that they're interested in around AI. And 44% explicitly name staffing constraints or role compression as one of their key conditional factors. The third opportunity here, really driving what folks in rural contexts see as possible around AI, is preparing students for economic and civic life. And what this means is AI is helping rural systems prepare students for rapidly changing local economies, global economies, career pathways that are in flux, all of that in partnership with local community colleges, local university systems, and local industry partners as well. So again, aligning learning to evolving industry needs, expanding career-connected learning and opportunities, building awareness and skills for AI-shaped work. And from the data, 57% of the 114 applications reference some sort of CTE or economic readiness piece as well. And 81% of applications reference career and workforce opportunity more broadly. And often those were tied directly to democratic participation as well, and helping students understand the landscape around information, around media, in the age of AI. So connecting all three of those things. But just want to double click on the idea that whenever we talk to folks, whenever folks are expressing what are they interested in AI, rural folks were communicating back to us that it starts with the opportunity, not with the tool. What are we actually trying to enable with this technology? Megan, take us to the next slide. With an understanding of the opportunities that are driving AI use in rural schools at this point, we also wanted to understand what are those uses looking like? Like, how does AI show up in practice across all of this research? And we really landed again on three buckets. The first one is around operational uses. So non-instructional uses that support system operations, thinking admin, scheduling, IT support. That came up in 74% of applications reporting engagement in admin time or in admin slash like time saving usage. And then 33%, a third of our applicants were actively piloting in this area already prior to Strategy Lab. So this is work that many school districts or many school systems in rural contexts are already engaging with. And then a quick quote here from a regional leader talking about specifics around this. He's also the transportation lead for his school district, and he mentioned that bus route analysis could be done using AI, obviously within constraints and thinking about student data privacy and not loading student addresses or PII into a chatbot, but working with a partner tool or a partner vendor who's creating an AI tool that helps to optimize bus routes based on scheduling, based on fuel expenses, things like that. And he mentioned that saving him hours back in a week, at least at the beginning of the year as he's planning those things. The next use case is really around like instructional supports. So we're thinking of these as teacher-facing uses that support planning and instruction, meaning lesson design, creating materials, offering students feedback, those administrative tasks around like enabling powerful learning and enabling teachers to do powerful instructional practices. This came up in 85% of our applications who reported engagement instructional planning in one of those or other related task type things. And 32%, so again, right at one third of our applicants are already piloting in this area. One district leader put it this way in a conversation: teachers are using AI for lesson planning, but we don't know how deep that actually or that use actually goes. We don't know how that use is actually implementing or is translating into student learning and things like that. But we know that folks are actually using it around lesson planning. And then the third category is really around student-facing uses. So thinking about direct student use as part of learning experiences, students using tutoring bots, using supports to help build skills, and actually applying their knowledge through tools like generative AI to create demonstrations of their learning. 84% of applicants are exploring or piloting in this space, and 80 are exploring or piloting potential student uses, and 24% are actively piloting in this area. And then one district leader put it this way: we want to give students real world AI experience, but we're opening the gates carefully. That's one thing that we kept seeing across this. Folks in rural contexts understand the real student safety implications, thinking about how are we creating opportunities for students to learn to use these tools in safe, in secure ways that do not put their data at risk, that do not overextend, things like that, but really thinking about like them as the end user and how are we building the structures needed to get teachers able to use tools to powerfully with students, building student literacy to be able to use those tools as well. Megan, next slide for us. So where are the gaps emerging? Again, this is a group of three, but we're thinking about if we have our driving goals, we have our like student or our actual uses that are emerging. Where are some of the gaps that folks can name as we're having these conversations? And the first is around policy and guidance. Clear expectations and guardrails are still emerging, leaving systems to navigate implementation in real time. Professional learning systems are not yet ready for AI, right? Like oftentimes, like we're seeing that AI professional learning is one-off tool developments or one-off like this is how you use the specific tool rather than focused on like instructional uses, more powerful uses. How are you integrating AI into more of a holistic understanding of like the systems around teaching and learning? Um, and then the third one here is really around tool and provider landscape. So there's an expanding and uneven tool ecosystem that makes it difficult to identify what's high quality, aligned to need. A lot of that work is really up to folks on the ground in school districts trying to understand like what works, how are we choosing tools, why are we choosing tools, and at the same time that all of these new AI tools and products are popping up, AI is also emerging in all and many of the existing tools are curricula things that folks have already purchased, right? Thinking of AI as both like an arrival technology and this destabilizing factor in the ed tech tool market. Folks are having a hard time navigating those pieces. Megan, take us to the next one. Just want to share again a table that summarizes all of this information. We've got those driving opportunities, what folks are naming that makes possible at scale, how it's showing up across those three different use cases, and then what's stopping, or excuse me, what's shaping what's possible right now. So again, feel free to access that report. That's table one that does all of the crosswalking there. Another interesting finding, Megan, take us to the next slide, is that there's this emerging model that we want to talk about and really center some of the conversation on today that we think perhaps is not unique to rural, but that rural makes really, really visible. And that's the interaction of coherence and constraint that shapes how AI takes hold across schools and systems. So when we're talking about coherence, one of the things that emerges is alignment across people, priorities, practice that allows systems to move with clarity. We understand that that's built through relationships, through trust, through shared direction, that it shortens the distance between decisions, right, from leadership and classroom practice when they're coherently aligned. Like it doesn't take as much time to get folks on board to move from ideation into implementation. And it enables faster feedback and more consistent implementation across the board. We're seeing coherence, right, like emerge across rural districts because of inherent and unique strengths that these places have, right, around community. And again, rural is not a monolith, but one of the things that we saw that came up again across multiple conversations was deeper relationships, deeper ties between not only within schools and across school leadership down to instruction or instructional leaders, but also around the school, like connections between community and folks in the school, and teachers and leaders within schools. At the same time, we also have to think about constraint, right? So the structural conditions that shape what's possible and how work is actually taken up. Things like limited staffing, role compression, and resource constraints that are showing up across rural contexts as well. Again, not necessarily uniquely to rural, but are showing up in very specific ways in rural contexts. Thinking about constraint as requiring systems to prioritize and build as they go. Folks can't do everything all at once. We can't boil the ocean. We have to be very clear about what is it that we're focusing on. And through that, that's creating both pressure to innovate, right? Like rural contexts often have this innovation ethos where we just do what we need to do to make it work for our kids, but it also forces a focus around what is the way that we're actually trying to innovate. Megan, take us to the next slide. We think this is really interesting because rural systems offer a clear lens into this dynamic as they're more likely to operate under conditions of high coherence and constraint. So we've actually organized this. I'm not going to go all the way into each of these four quadrants, but you might be thinking, Michael, wouldn't it make more sense if like we want high coherence and low constraint. We want systems, or we might be able to learn the most from systems who have tons of resources, who aren't facing constraints, who have a ton of coherence around what is it that they're actually trying to do. But because of that focus and that pressure mechanism, we actually think that some of the more durable, more transformational uses of AI might emerge from these systems that are operating with high coherence and under high constraint. And under high constraints as well. So thinking about system transformation under constraint as systems that leverage coherence to redesign core practices in response to real needs. And through that, change becomes structural and sustained, reshaping how teaching and learning operate across the system. Megan, one more time for us. Again, systems are operating with high coherence and high constraint. They're often able to align quickly around real needs, move from experimentation to coordinated action, and in some cases, redesign core practices in more durable ways. This dynamic, again, is not unique to rural systems, but we do think that rural contexts make it more visible and might help us understand what are the most powerful ways that we might be using AI to transform the system of teaching and learning. So it's one of the key findings that we're really excited about digging in with and alongside the folks that are participating in our program. Megan, take us to the next slide. So with that, right, we've got all of these findings that are shaping how the program is taking shape, that are influencing our thinking as well. But I actually want to turn it over at this point to my colleague Megan to tell us a little bit more about what are we doing with the folks who are participating in Strategy Lab.
Thanks so much, Michael. So at FullScale, one of the ways we support collective learning and breaking down silos across the education system is through our strategy labs. I'm very honored to be leading our Rural AI Strategy Lab to help support the work you just heard Michael speak about, specifically in rural context. Growing up in rural Vermont, these issues are particularly near and dear to my heart. So again, just very grateful we have the opportunity to do this work together. So through Strategy Lab, we start with real problems being experienced by our teams in their systems, problems like teacher capacity, limited coaching bandwidth, educator isolation. And we're supporting teams to use AI to enable solutions to solve these problems. It's really important. We believe it's really important to start with the problems and then seek a tool. Otherwise, we risk designing around technology instead of around the real people and problems that matter the most. We are designing solutions together within the constraints, and we are learning out in the open, sharing what is working and isn't working, and producing actionable resources to share with the field. So just to dive in a little bit more to how this works, we are leveraging FullScale's real-time redesign process in which teams come together to really deeply understand their challenges. So the first piece that we did is teams went through a discovery research process in which they conducted different types of research like empathy interviews, focus groups. They maybe looked at existing data to really try to understand the underlying causes of the challenge that they had identified. In the next phase, in Dream Big, we use those underlying causes to define a user-centered problem. And then we brainstorm AI-enabled solutions, selecting one, and only then do we actually select an AI tool to do the enabling. Teams are then coming up very shortly, going to be prototyping some of their ideas and then designing a pilot for the solution that will be implemented in the fall. We will also be working together to consider how we can scale beyond this particular program. And if they'd like, learning this process, they can go right back to the beginning and use the real-time redesign process to start solving for another challenge. We are so excited to have 13 teams joining us for the Strategy Lab. As Michael said, we had 114 applications, and they represent rural contexts from across the United States. You'll actually get a chance to meet 3 of our team leads in just a bit. But the rest of our cohort teams are Davenport School District from Davenport, Washington, Elko County School District in Elko, Nevada, Griswold Public Schools in Griswold, Connecticut, Iona County Career Center in Iona, Michigan, Martin County Schools in Williamston, North Carolina. You should totally give some shout outs in the chat if you hear your state if you hear your state called. Mount Greylock Regional School District in Williamstown, Massachusetts. Mojave Valley Elementary School District in Mojave Valley, Arizona. Pikeville Independent Schools in Pikeville, Kentucky. Cape Flattery School District in, oh, I'm gonna mess this one up. Sikio. I'm gonna need some help with that one in Washington. Thankfully, we're gonna hear from Kate Flattery shortly, and she can say it right for you. Louisa County Public Schools in Mineral, Virginia, Polk County Schools in Benton, Tennessee, and Berkshire Hills Regional School District in Great Barrington, Massachusetts. So welcome to all of our teams. As we have been working our way through the first two phases of our process, we're seeing several common themes across the teams in terms of the challenges that they're identifying. So we just want to share some of those early learnings with you. One bucket of work that seems to be a common challenge is around strengthening instruction. Teachers are being asked to meet increasingly complex instructional demands, from differentiation to lesson design to implementing new curriculum and instructional practices, often without enough time, support, training, or collaborative structures to do so effectively and sustainably. Schools are also working to better serve increasingly diverse learners, including multilingual learners, students with disabilities, and mixed ability classrooms, while building the educator capacity, instructional strategies, and support systems needed to meet those needs. We're also seeing, especially around the CTE world, schools are really working to help students build a clearer vision for their future by connecting learning to their identity, their purpose, and post-secondary pathways that feel relevant, actionable, and grounded in local community and local opportunities. We have begun sharing some of our learnings through blogs, which you can find on our program microsite. Thank you, Jasmine, for dropping that site in there. And as we move to our next phase of designing and prototyping the solutions, we'll continue producing resources that can help other teams, many of whom might be on the call today, engage in the same kind of work. So with that, we are now going to hear from the real stars of the show, our practitioners who are part of our Rural Strategy Lab cohort. So we are going to hear from them about how these dynamics that we've just heard about today are showing up inside systems doing this work in real time. So I'm thrilled to introduce today Dr. Katie Wolf, who is an instructional facilitator at Cape Flattery School District, Joe Bergeron, Superintendent at Mount Greylock Regional School District, and Heather Steele, CTE Facilitator at Elko County School District. So thank you all for joining. Oops, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. But please do feel free to drop questions in as we go. All right, so thank you again for joining us today. The first question that we have for you is, what problem or opportunity led your team into this work? Joe, why don't we start with you?
Sure. We always suffer from the age-old problem of how do we do better, do more with the same people or with fewer people in unfortunate times as well. And one such area that we are trying to work on. We started this work in earnest a couple of years ago, and we really found new focus over the last year is in how do we address behavior in ways that are educational and relational and restorative as opposed to purely consequential. And within that work, we're doing a lot of trying to figure out, okay, how do we try to better understand root causes of what's happening? How do we work with students to understand impact of what they're doing? How do we keep students safe? How do we work with other students to educate them around what's happening and bring them into that circle of understanding and improvement? How do we communicate with families? There are a lot of different touch points, a lot of different layers of trying to understand what we do. And as we looked at that problem of practice, AI is one area where we can increase the scale and the depth of our knowledge and our capabilities in ways that we're really looking forward to exploring. So that's what we're doing first.
Thanks, Joe. Katie, do you want to go next? And I am so sorry if you want to say the actual pronunciation of where your school is, that would be great.
Yeah, sure. So our school is located in CQ, Washington. Well, that's the district. I'm actually based in Nia Bay, Washington, which is the most northwestern point of the contiguous United States. And so we're right on the ocean in Washington, as far north and west as you can go on a map. And so. What led us into this work was really our unique context. So we are a public school, but we serve the Makah Reservation. So we're actually completely surrounded by the Makah Reservation. And our students, because we have in Nia Bay, we serve 100% Native American students, and we actually have one other school in our district that is about 45 minutes away. And then they kind of catch everyone off the res, right, and outside of the reservation. And so we are always looking for ways that we can serve our students in a culturally responsive way and meeting their specific unique needs. Our district, we are like 2 hours from the nearest large department store, like a Safeway, like a grocery store. And so we are very, very isolated. And so we started working with AI. I mean, really kind of from when AI came out in the very beginning, and we started looking at how can we use this new tool, right, to serve some very unique needs. And one of our successes has been to capture some of the Makah language. So we actually are in the process of developing an AI box that will speak Makah to our students who are practicing Makah and learning Makah. And so from that, then when we saw, this opportunity for further AI research, then that's kind of when we really dug in to look at what other opportunities AI might give us to serve our students. And so we're currently looking at differentiation for our students. I think in the post-COVID world, we see a lot of now our students who are in our secondary specifically they missed school like in elementary. And so, we have these unique gaps. Like it's like we might have 20 kids in a classroom and there might be 18 different skills that they missed. And so, how do you meet those needs, right, within the same classroom and to try to get everyone to be on the same page, right, to like a secondary learning standard. And so that's what we are currently exploring within this context of AI.
Thank you, Katie. Heather?
Perfect. So, through our comprehensive local needs assessment, which is a required part of Perkins 5, those of you that are familiar with that world understand that we do a deep dive into our data every couple of years and try to address the whys in our comprehensive local needs assessment. For years and years and years, our students in special populations have not been succeeding, retaining in their CTE programs at the same rate of their non-specialist populations. And it seems like no matter what we do, that needle's not moving. So we needed to try something a little bit different. So I've been utilizing when we ask staff why do you think it is? When we ask sped teachers, why do you think these kids aren't being attracted into these programs, not gaining their skills and seeing the value of CTE? No matter what question we ask, the end result is always time. We don't have time. Sped teachers don't have time. CTE teachers don't have time. We don't have time to individualize instruction like we need to. So through that, and through me using AI in my own office to try to streamline my processes and be able to do a CLNA and kind of put all that data together, we decided that we would find a way to pair CTE teachers with special education teachers and have them legitimately go through a process of what does it take to develop a lesson and then think about a student and accommodate for that one student in these very small controlled groups. And then we have a great digital coach and how can we use AI to do that? So through all of that work, what we're working on right now with the Rural AI Strategy Lab is building a tool that's going to be a real live accommodation assistant for CTE teachers to be able to input a lesson or something and then be able to ask for an accommodation for those. So we're hoping that with an actual tool at teachers' fingertips and sped teachers' fingertips that we'll be able to not necessarily eliminate time, but eliminate and reduce time as the major constraint for the why behind why students aren't succeeding in our programs.
Thank you so much, everyone, for sharing. And I'm so looking forward to getting to work with you to solve these problems. I'm wondering if you can share with folks a little bit more about what, if anything, have you tried so far to address these problems? And maybe a little bit of what you learned from your discovery process. So, whether you did empathy interviews or you looked at existing data, what did you learn about the reasons that were undergirding this? Anything you've tried so far? Katie, why don't we start with you?
All right, sounds good. So some of the things that we've looked at in data-wise and what we've learned after examining that was that due to our context, we have a lot of teachers that are brand new to profession. We have a lot of within the first 5 years of their teaching profession teachers, and we also have, so that's about half of our staff. The other half of our staff are teachers that are from the community, so they're homegrown teachers, and because they're teachers from our local rural community, then many of them have access teaching through like an alternative pathway, through some other way than, your traditional go to college for 4 years and then you might do a post-bac or a master's program, right, to get your teaching. It's looking very, very different for those teachers. And so because about a third of those teachers are certificated through our cultural certificate through Washington State. So they're a cultural artist, or someone who has a cultural knowledge. So they maybe didn't go through a teaching program like at all, right? Because they're certified in a different way. And so when we're looking at how to best serve, all those diverse needs, because our teachers feel like they don't have all of those different tools in their toolbox to be able to address those needs, then that was something that we were, really actually excited to find in our data because we feel like that might be a perfect way that AI can help us, with that, with giving, teachers some of those strategies, right? And working together as a staff to really kind of like hone in and figure out how do we solve these very unique problems in our classrooms.
I'm so glad that what you uncovered made you feel that way. We had another team who said it just sort of hits you when they were, once they actually dug into their data. He said he sat back and he said, "Huh, it just sort of hits you. We've tried all of these things and now we've peeled back the layers even more, and really getting down to those root causes can be not the best feeling." But I think also reframed as excitement is really helpful. Thank you, Katie. Heather?
I'll start with we work in silos. That's the biggest issue with us is special education teachers work in their silo. They're addressing their things on their level with the students. CTE works in its own silo over here doing our thing, preparing students for workforce, and we're off on our own realm. And then core and academic contents, they're off in their silo doing their thing. And so it's not that collaboration isn't happening on school sites because everybody's busy doing their own thing and nobody has time to really cross collaborate. So our initial attack was let's break the cross collaboration barrier. The plan is if we can build these kinds of tools and resources that are effective for CTE teachers, it'll be super easy to make it effective for English, math, social studies, and science because they're not dealing with tools and dangerous equipment and kids being in what is perceived by a lot of people uncontrolled environments. If we can get it to work effectively in the CTE world, then it will be easy to light the fire and have it blaze through our entire system so that to alleviate work for everybody, but to lift up the students ultimately, because that's what it's about, right? Is lifting up the students and giving them the tools that they need to be successful, not just in our buildings, but when they've left us or they're out in the workforce, because that's our goal. It's not just graduation, but what they're doing beyond that. So we're excited about it. Sure.
Thanks, Heather. Joe?
Yeah, we went through a very enjoyable and frustrating empathy interview process with staff and students because we know the end goal is somehow this magical people respond to a situation in a way that's just pitch perfect with the right content, and they facilitate a conversation that leads to great learning, and then everybody has better understanding. And what we found from staff was that they say, sure, we've been doing some of these trainings and learning. Every situation's new. It's like a game of whack-a-mole with, a student just said this. I've never even heard that phrase before. Everybody else is laughing. I don't know what to do next. And the staff frustration is something where every bit of education we can bring, every resource that we can offer, opens more doors, but it also creates more of a burden. And with students, and we did empathy interviews with elementary school students, which was a very special experience. And we had classroom teachers doing that with those students. And students were relaying such mature, sophisticated responses like, I see the adult trying, but sometimes they don't know any better than me. Or I know that sometimes the only thing that you can do is to separate the student who said that and then try to figure it out. But I have empathy for what's happening here because I feel the same way. And so a lot of it is like we're trying to get these educational resources lined up. We're trying to create the time and the space to do all of these expansive responses. Um, but we just haven't been able to line it up yet. So a lot of what we're starting to do here with AI is to try to figure out how can we scale our capacity, how can we provide depth of knowledge, expose that, and lead to reflection that can happen more quickly with between our staff and our students.
Amazing. Thank you. I love those reflections from the littles. They just mean so much. So we've talked a lot about constraints. I want to talk a little bit about coherence. So what unique strengths support the coherence in your context? And what does that mean for your projects? What are some of your strengths that you're going to leverage here? Anyone want to go first? Go ahead,
I'll
Heather.
jump, yep,
Thank you.
I'll jump in. So the strength is obviously the educators who want to see students succeed, period. In whatever context those students want to succeed. Through our PD sessions and our pairings of CTE teachers with SPED teachers, we've seen a lot of growth in their own realization and professional practice. We still see them saying, oh my gosh, we wish we could do this all the time, but the time just isn't there for us to co-plan, and it's just not there. So that's where we're hoping the tool will help develop this. I learned a lot about how intricate a sock monkey project is when you really get down to the nuts and bolts and you think about a student who has fine motor skills as a challenge, for example, and how you can adapt a sock monkey 42 different ways to remove the barrier for that student with those fine motor skill challenges. But until you get in and you start having that conversation about that one student and that particular project, those things don't necessarily come to light, especially if a teacher can see a student struggling. A sped teacher knows that the student's been has fine motor skill challenges, but until we collaborate to figure out how to edit the sock monkey to be able to make that student succeed, and grow the perseverance in that student actually having say in what would make that project better. It's one project, it was in one classroom, but seeing just the realization of how something so small could be so impactful, and then the want to drive that forward for sure.
Thank you. Joe?
Yeah, and it's really an echo of what I think Heather started with there is that we have people who care.
Mm.
And I think that's part of sometimes when people think of AI, the irony is that people who care want to be able to do something that's more in depth with better knowledge and be able to take the extra step, but their knowledge and their time don't allow for that. Like they want to line up the extra email to send to the classroom's families saying, here's something that happened today. Here are resources that I have to offer. Here are conversation prompts that I welcome you into. Doing that when you're also swamped with a million other things is really tough. So the coherence is we have people who really care, who want to do this, and that can drive, I think, really caring adoption of whatever tools we have if we can make them easy enough to use, accurate enough on a regular basis, without creating burdens that they can't overcome.
Thanks, Joe. Katie?
Yeah, so I was thinking that we actually are one of our strengths, I would say would be capacity because we have, say, we're going to pilot and we're going to be working with our secondary. We're going to focus on our secondary, and we have about 20 teachers in our secondary. And because that number is so manageable for me, then I can provide, like real support in the classroom immediately. Like I can touch base with all 20 of my teachers who are working on that day. Like the very first day, I can go in, I can pop in, we can work with them directly. And so there aren't those like, structural barriers where I'm working with multiple department heads, right? Multiple coaches, and instructors who we're pushing out into, so many different classrooms, right? When we're working with these tools, it's going to be able to be immediate, right? And then get immediate help, right? When something isn't working, then I'll just run over, to those classrooms and work with those teachers. So definitely a benefit for the size of our school.
Yeah, I love that. Um, well, thank you so much for answering our questions. I'm now going to turn it back over to Michael, who is going to ask some questions from our audience.
Thanks, folks. Just making sure I was off of mute there. So again, folks in the audience, if you have questions for our panelists, please add those in. But one question that has already come up is when you're thinking about Strategy Lab, what are you most excited about getting out of a program like Strategy Lab? And then second, what additional supports might you need, right? Like in addition to Strategy Lab, like has that highlighted? It would be really great if there's this other thing that we might be able to do. So one, Strategy Lab, and two, like what additional supports might extend the work that you're doing beyond that as well. I'm happy to go. Joe, there we go. You got it.
Sure. I'll just offer up that the subject area expertise coupled with uh, depth of knowledge and experience within public education, that pairing is very difficult to find in the world right now. There are a million AI resources. There are a million people, not a million people. There are lots of people who have worked in public education for many years, but the intersection between those two things it feels very small right now. So when we saw this grant opportunity and the opportunity to collaborate with the team and with the expertise that you have, that was what made me light up more than anything else. And so far it's really held true, which has been it's been awesome.
Yeah, I want to piggyback off of what Joe said, because in my context, I'm always the one who's out there and trying to bring something into the district. I do all of our PD and everything, and so and then I actually also do PD like at the state level and then actually in the West Coast region for different reasons. So what has been the biggest benefit I think is that collaboration and then that coaching. Megan's our coach there, and it's so wonderful to have that kind of somebody who has more knowledge about, these specific systems and these specific ways. And then also kind of that outside looking in. I love that perspective. Just because we don't really ever, I don't ever really get that. And so having that from Megan, being able to have someone kind of looking at our data from the outside, and then also, someone who has all these different ideas and different exposures to work on that collaboration process has just been the most beneficial thing, I think, through the lab so far. And I think when we had that time to work with the teams and working with the other school contexts, again, it just gives us so much knowledge and so many ideas, right, on where to go and what we want to look at.
Yeah, and I'll add to both what Joe and Katie said. And one of the things when you're trying to solve a problem in education, it's this big, like it's huge, right? And what the team has been able to do and us work and through the workbook work and kind of the stuff that we've done is made sure that we've kept it narrow enough to actually create a solution to solve a small part of that problem so it will actually have impact, right? Because I find over and over and over, we're always throwing solutions at problems that don't actually ever really impact things. It looks good on the outside, but being able to, nope, you guys got to, our coach is really great about, nope, we want to narrow, keep it narrow, keep it narrow, keep it narrow, so that you have something to really launch from and continue to build forward. And I appreciate that about what we're doing.
That's so exciting to hear. And I totally agree. I think that's the ethos of the strategy of that process and thinking about like this is an iterative, right? Like when we try to boil the ocean, we make no progress. But if we take one bucket at a time, then we can solve a challenge and build on success as we're going. So really excited to hear that. We have a question from an audience member around availability of devices or the internet access. And so how does that affect your ability to successfully and regularly deliver AI enhanced lessons? Like, are you all having connectivity or device issues? And that feels particularly poignant right now as like much of the country is having big conversations around devices and who's using them and how they're using them in schools.
I'll jump in first. I'm in Mini, Alaska. Like that's what we kind of call our area here. So just because we literally have one road that comes in and out of the community. So if the road washes out, we don't have power, we don't have internet for who knows how long. It's been the longest that I've been here for 7 years, the longest we've been without internet and the road has been a week. So but that was, one special storm. But so I do think that if we focus on planning and we focus on preparation, because the idea here with this project is that we have planned and prepared through AI, not maybe like have a student-facing AI, implementation model. So if we've planned and prepared through AI, hopefully then the connectivity issue is not an issue, just because, we try to always make sure, at least in our context, that whatever we're doing that day is available offline should, the road go out. So definitely, something that hopefully we won't deal with. I think that the timing of the year has been really wonderful as well because we're in the spring, summer, fall, whereas winter is our big time, right, where we will experience the most internet issues. We are one-to-one school, so we do have enough devices one-to-one, although we have talked about next year, and I know those are part of the larger conversations I think the districts are having, is kind of not having a one-to-one model, but having just devices available in each classroom, right, every day, as opposed to having the kids taking them home, just with some of the research, that's surrounding that. So that may change, what our ultimate pilot looks like. But yeah.
We are also one-to-one, and we generally have very good connectivity. So we are more in the camp of the districts that are trying to figure out the most judicious use of technology. That said, our instructional staff who are not teachers, paraprofessionals, their access is limited. This is the first area where we are considering leaning on technology with them in a way that would be really regular and helpful. And so that will be a challenge, but it's not. I don't think our challenge is the same as the one that might be cited here.
We're also a one-to-one district. We're not looking yet at student tools as far as an AI solution. Kids are using AI, everybody knows that. It's no mystery, and if they want to use it, they'll find a way, whether it's with their district device or the device that's in their pocket. We do have potential connectivity issues as well, just because of the rural nature of our school. We're in almost to the point now where we have fiber at each school site, so that's going to help significantly. But if too many kids are on Chromebooks at too many of the times, it really slows the network. So but we're at the point where we really want kids to be learning how to use AI, and we're having employers tell us they want students to know how to use AI appropriately. At one point, we all had to train kids how to use the internet appropriately, and no matter how much you train them, they find all of the other ways around that. That's just the nature of students. That's your innovative thinkers, and I feel like we need to, as educators, to embrace that innovation and continue to have kids teach us what they're doing with their tools. Because that's the innovative thinking that's happening that we should be embracing and encouraging as educators. So anyway, yeah, soapbox, sorry.
No, I appreciate it, and I appreciate all of those points. That's one of the call out boxes in the report itself is that like a critical conversation we have to have around rural is always connectivity. We know that there are definitely still places in this country that are underconnected where students don't have access to devices. That's increasing as like we're having these like political debates around devices themselves. But that there is also a lot of really great progress that has been made over the last couple of years, and that if we treat rural like a monolith and like its access is the only problem, then like we're actually leaving you all behind as folks who are ready to jump and ready to engage in like what are these more powerful uses once we do have access. So we have to hold both of those things at the same time. For the sake of time, there are a couple of questions in the Q&A. We will follow up directly with folks. There's one around like how are we helping folks select AI tools? Megan's created some really great resources around that. And so Alcine, we will be sure to get those out to you. We'll probably share it out wholly or like broadly with everyone in our follow-up email as well, because we're really proud of those. Virgil, with the time left, I'm wondering if you want to have our final word here, like just wrapping it back up as someone who's led in rural context, who's leading this work now from the full scale perspective. What are you seeing as like the implications for the field broadly?
Yeah, well, first of all, just want to thank our panelists for joining us and sharing your wisdom and lived experience. It really matters greatly, and I hope you're reading some of the commentary from team in respect to some of the high fives they're giving you in chat. So thank you again for that. And just a couple of considerations as we're thinking about our sock monkey context that exists within each of our learning communities. As we're really thinking about these possibilities, one is like if there's one key takeaway, because I'm going to spit out like five things, but if there's one key takeaway, and I'm just drafting notes here from the team here, coherence is not a luxury. It's what allows systems to navigate constraint productively. So all of our panels really helped us to think about like it's not about a specific tool. It's not about it's about how do we collectively design towards productive utilization or addressing that opportunity or that challenge before us. Another implication is really Joe said this, and everyone said this, but a piece that I specifically highlighted, Joe, is like AI has the potential to be that force multiplier for thinly staffed systems, which we all experience in learning communities, but especially in rural systems. We need to be careful also about the infrastructure inequities that could widen opportunity gaps if these things are left unaddressed, right? And thinking about how we are implementing AI. It came up loud and clear, meta theme. Professional learning must be practical, ongoing, and job embedded. Really thinking about all of our team players within our learning community. How are we thoughtful in our utilization and learning from one another in a coherent way? And really, it came across in thinking about in learning from each of you is rural educators need to be a part of the national AI conversation because you all are um, innovating, designing, learning, checking, and adjusting on a daily basis. And your rapid cycle implementation and innovation cycles are just something that we need to learn from and need to share and appreciate you doing that in this strategy lab. Another biggie is trust and community engagement matters greatly when thinking about implementation and community being in our schools, in our classrooms, but across our learning community as a whole. So again, thank you, each of you, for leaning in. And for those that have joined us on the webinar, we invite you to share your learnings. We want to learn from you. We want to include you in these conversations. What are those lessons learned? What are things that we should be considering? Appreciate you all joining us. Michael?
Awesome. Thank you, Virgil, for those last words. Just want to end on a note of this is what we've learned from desk research, from applications, from interviews, and like from the very beginning of the process of working with these teams. We are super excited to dig deeper, to really understand what are the contextual pieces, like how are we learning more alongside these folks and sharing it back out with the field to drive the conversations and to shift the conversation about AI at the national level, specifically around rural AI and using rural as like this lighthouse that helps us understand like what might be possible for us if we get this moment right. So just want to say, please follow along. Thank you for joining us today. Thank you to our panelists again. Thank you to the FullScale staff for making this webinar possible and for making this work possible. We will be following up in the next couple of days with an email with all of our information, but just really appreciate everyone for joining us today. Thanks, folks.